They say a house is just a place until someone you love fills it with laughter. And when that someone is gone, it becomes something else entirely. I never thought I'd say this, but the only thing keeping this house from collapsing under the weight of silence is a creature I once resented. I wasn't a dog person, not even close. I like my slippers untouched, my mornings quiet, and my afternoons predictable. Life to me was best lived in order, tidy, quiet, and without pause, scratching across the hallway. But all of that changed the day she walked in. My wife, glowing with a softness that always disarmed me, cradling in her arms a bundle of fur no larger than a loaf of bread. Its ears drooped like wet leaves, eyes wide as though it had seen too much for a life so new, and its tiny chest shivered beneath a towel that smelled faintly of her perfume. "This is your birthday gift," she whispered, smiling, "because I won't be around forever, and I need someone to love you when I'm gone." I laughed, the way we often laugh when we don't know what else to do with something that sounds too honest, too raw. I didn't know it then, but that little creature would become the echo of her footsteps long after she was no longer walking beside me. And somehow it would also become the reason I learned to love again. Differently. At first I kept my distance. I'd sit in my chair, the one by the window where the morning sun hit just right, pretending not to notice the small shadow that followed her everywhere, tail wagging, eyes gleaming with a loyalty I hadn't earned. I told myself I didn't need it, didn't want it, but in truth I was afraid. Not of the dog, but of what it represented, a future she wouldn't be in. Scientists say that the older we get, the more our brains resist change. The familiar becomes a sanctuary. Even the rustling of newspaper pages or the creak of the same old floorboard brings comfort. But love doesn't care about age. It challenges your resistance. It slips through the cracks. And that dog, small, chaotic, persistent, was love in its most inconvenient form. Every time it barked, I sighed. Every time it chewed through another sock, I grumbled. And every time she knelt down to stroke its ears, whispering its name like a lullaby, I felt a pang in my chest. The kind of ache that warns you something is slipping through your fingers. Weeks passed. Her footsteps grew softer. She laughed less. Still, every morning, she'd lower herself onto the rug, wincing slightly but pretending not to, tossing that worn-out red ball across the room. "Go on," she'd whisper, her voice thinner than before. "Make Grandpa chase you." And he would, not for me, for her. You see, Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust and author of Man's Search for Meaning, once wrote that when we can no longer change our situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. I think that's what she was doing. She knew her time was short, so she planted something alive in the space she was about to leave, something that would grow where grief would otherwise fester. But I didn't understand any of that then. All I saw was a woman I loved, fading like the light at the end of day, and a dog too full of life, taking up the space where my fear wanted to hide. Until one morning, she didn't get up. That morning the sun rose just like it always did, soft, golden, indifferent, but the house felt different. I didn't hear the tea kettle whistle, didn't hear the rustle of her slippers brushing the hallway rug, didn't hear her hum that off-key tune she always sang when feeding the dog. Instead, I was met with a silence so absolute, it pressed against my skin like cold glass. I called her name, once, twice, and then I opened the bedroom door. There are moments in life when time doesn't stop, it sharpens. Colors become too bright, sounds too loud. The tiny inhalation I took when I saw her lying there, still, impossibly still, was a breath I never fully exhaled. Her hand rested gently against the pillow, fingers curled as if she'd fallen asleep mid-thought. And beside the bed, on the rug worn thin by years of her pacing, he sat. That dog, perfectly still, watching her, as if willing her to wake. People don't talk enough about how grief doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, like cold through a window left slightly ajar. And with it come the questions, quiet, cruel questions that whisper late into the night. Did I miss something? Was there a sign? Could I have stopped it? Doctors often tell us about subtle symptoms in older adults. Fatigue, appetite changes, a slower gait, quiet withdrawal. But when you live with someone every day, these signs don't scream. They fade. And before you know it, you've mistaken illness for aging, sadness for sleepiness, quietness for peace. Looking back, I realized she had been whispering her goodbye long before that morning. In the way she kissed me just a little longer at night. In the way she watched the dog with that distant smile, as if making sure he'd remember her once she was gone. And now she was gone. The house, our house, felt like a museum of echoes. Each room holding the sound of a voice that would never return. And yet, in the middle of that unbearable silence, he moved. The dog padded softly to my feet, sat down, and looked up at me. Not with confusion, not with fear, but with the same eyes she once had. Kind, steady, knowing. And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not violently, but quietly, like the gentle break of ice in spring. In the days that followed, I moved like a ghost through the halls we once filled with laughter. Grief clung to my skin like humidity before a storm, thick, invisible, and inescapable. I ate little, slept less. There were moments I forgot to breathe until my lungs screamed for air. They say when someone you love dies, two things are left behind: their absence and everything they touched. I found her in the details, in the sweater draped over her favorite chair, in the faint smell of lavender on her pillow, in the half-written grocery list she had pinned to the fridge. Milk, tea, biscuits, dog treats, and in him. The dog did not weep. He did not wail or break down in the dramatic ways we humans do. But he waited. He waited by the door at dusk, ears perked, as if hoping she'd return from some forgotten errand. He sat under the table at breakfast, gazing at the chair where she once sat, where crumbs always rained like gentle blessings. He followed me, silently, faithfully, as if he knew the only thing more fragile than me in that house was the quiet. And slowly, impossibly, I found myself talking to him. Not because I believed he understood the words, but because he carried her silence better than I ever could. He listened, with his eyes, with his stillness, with that uncanny ability dogs have, to sense heartbreak not by sound, but by scent. Science tells us that the presence of a pet can reduce cortisol levels, lower blood pressure, and ease the weight of loneliness in older adults. But no research could explain what it meant when he nudged my hand during one of my darker nights, when I thought of joining her. No data point could capture the warmth of a living soul curled against you when all you want is to disappear. He wasn't just a dog. He was the last thread tying me to the woman who had known my soul better than I did. And somehow, through him, she was still loving me, not with words, but with every quiet breath he took beside me, with every time he led me to her garden, with every moment he looked into my eyes and reminded me that some forms of love never leave. They simply change shape. It's been years now. The tea still steams from 2 cups each morning, one for me and one for her. I still place it beside her photo, as if somehow the warmth will reach her across whatever distance exists between now and forever. He still curls beneath the table, in the same spot where she used to drop tiny bits of toast and smile when she thought I wasn't looking. Only now he's older, slower, and his eyes carry the same weight mine do. A quiet understanding that love changes, but never fades. I no longer cry when I say her name. I say it with a kind of reverence, like a hymn sung softly at dusk. Because I've come to realize something that perhaps we all must learn, eventually. Grief is not a wound to heal. It's a place we learn to live inside, a room we furnish with memory, scent, and silence, until it feels less like loss and more like presence in another form. Sometimes when he looks at me a certain way, head tilted, eyes searching, I swear I see her. Not literally, but deeply, in the way you feel the sun on your face without ever needing to see the sky. And maybe that's the question I leave you with, the one that still sits quietly in the corners of my mind. What if love never truly leaves us? What if it just changes vessels, moves from hand to paw, from voice to gaze, from presence to memory? Would we live differently, knowing that nothing truly beloved is ever lost, only transformed? I'm not here to offer answers, only to share what remains: a cup of tea, a quiet house, a loyal friend with tired eyes, and the echo of a woman's laugh, still dancing in the corners of a life once shared.